Our guest is Vikas Enti, the co-founder and CEO of Reframe Systems.
We're in the business of unlocking housing abundance.
Their mission is to build 1 million sustainable and climate-resilient homes by 2040.
So I think 60% of the country's properties today have some type of wildfire exposure risk, and that number just keeps increasing.
Even though they are not at mass production scale today, they are still able to produce homes cheaper than traditional stick-built methods.
Actually, our preferred customers are developers. If you think about all of our annual carbon emissions, about 27% of those are actually coming from our homes. Our homes are actually emitting more carbon than our cars.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Clean Techies podcast. I'm Silas Maynor, your favorite clean tech headhunter. At this point, we have all heard a lot about the affordability crisis when it comes to housing. And most of us have also heard about the need to build more climate resilient and energy efficient homes, given the continued rise of climate events. Today's guest is solving all three of those challenges and more. Our guest is Vikas Enti, the co-founder and CEO of Reframe Systems, and their mission is to build 1 million sustainable and climate-resilient homes by 2040. They're doing this using modular manufacturing technology. Today, they already have one factory in Massachusetts and are working on building their second. Even though they are not at mass production scale today, they are still able to produce homes cheaper than traditional stick-built methods. We cover a lot in today's short time, but the key themes that I found most interesting are how they are focused on solving the housing crisis first and then solving the climate crisis, and how that specifically, that ordering of things has been helpful in their growth, talent attraction, and fundraising. They are a company that also aims to build hundreds of factories. So I was curious, what did the MVP or what does the MVP of a factory look like? And he shared that as well as the steps they took to get their first house built in 18 months from completing the pitch deck to getting their first home in the ground in 18 months. This MVP to, product on the ground journey. I think that was really fascinating. And then perhaps my favorite part, he discussed how he convinced his co-founders to leave Amazon Robotics to join him and how they go about their talent acquisition using many of the principles that they learned at Amazon. There is, of course, a lot more to this in the episode, but those are some of my core kind of key things that I wanted to highlight in the introduction. Before we start, don't forget to register for the upcoming Hack Summit at New Lab in New York City. This is happening December 10th and 11th. There will be about 500 founders, investors, and ecosystem supporters for the climate deep tech industry there. And actually, many of our past podcast guests will be there. We will be there as well, creating content. We're really looking forward to this. If you are looking to attend, which I would recommend you do, the link to register is in the description. And a big shout out to our sponsors before we start, Climate Finance Solutions. If you want to land grant funding, reach out to Climate Finance Solutions. They have a 90% success rate of winning the grants that they have applied for and have secured over $1.6 billion in funding since 2020. So they really know what they're doing. Joel and the team are incredible. And then Earth Search, the search firm that I run, where if you need help to hiring, reach out to us. We can help you hire good talent in a very fast pace. We have the most extensive network in climate. I've been at this for 5.5 years with over 80 placements, and we provide a white glove service either for your screening services. If you're looking to just screen candidates that you have apply, we can help you take care of that and save you a lot of time, or we can go out and do active headhunting to get you the best talent. And we do it at prices that even a seed stage startup can afford. All right, with that, enjoy the episode. All right, Vikas, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
Excellent. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, really excited to have this. I think it's going to be a fascinating conversation. We'll see how much we can get through today. But I guess before we jump into it, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're working on today.
I'm the CEO, co-founder of Reframe Systems. We're in the business of unlocking housing abundance, and we're doing that by leveraging robotics and algorithms and microfactories that allow us to build homes that are energy resilient, climate resilient, significantly faster and more cost effective than on-site construction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a really important challenge. So many different things that you have in here. Can you tell a little bit more, like how did you end up deciding to do this? Because this is not exactly an easy company to build, at least from the outside looking in, it doesn't seem like it. So tell us a little bit more about the journey of figuring that out and how you got started.
Absolutely. It's definitely not easy. The short version of how we got started is I became a dad. Up to that point in time, I was at Amazon Robotics. It was sort of helping build out our fulfillment and sortation network so we could make same-day shipping a reality. Really got to deploy about 500,000 robots across 70 fulfillment centers across the world. So learned a thing or two in how do you scale complex technology. I became a dad, and so my twin girls are 4 years old now, and it was very clarifying and sort of asking this question on what other problem could I be working on that when my girls are teenagers, they could look back at it and say, my dad did that, that was really cool. And so that question sort of really opened up the aperture on, like, am I working on problems that are impactful enough to our community? And I think as I applied the lens, housing and climate really intersected, as they are the two biggest problems of our generation. And everything that has been done up to that point in time was only moving the cost in the wrong direction, and the speed of delivery of the solutions were incredibly slow. So the question then became, what does it take to build resilient homes, right? Call it 2 to 3 times as fast. Can we build them twice as cheap? And what needs to be true to make that happen? It took about a year from asking that question to arriving at the thesis of Reframe, where we build conviction with these rapidly deployable microfactories that borrow a lot of ideas from what we proved at Amazon. I can get into that later, and build conviction that the housing we build had to be better than code minimum homes, like had to be zero energy ready. More importantly, had to be built to a higher standard so they could withstand the changing climate. And that's what we've set out to do. So we've been 3 years at it now. We'll have 7 homes in the ground this year. That's 7 times more than last year. And we're sort of on this clip to get about 60 homes in the ground next year.
Wow, that's amazing. I think it's really fascinating, this idea that, and for background, just, my dad actually is a carpenter. I grew up working for him. And then he used to build houses. He had partners and they would build houses. So I understand a little bit of the space. I actually helped build the house my parents live in now when I was like 8, 9. We didn't have school that year. We just helped build a house. But I find it really fascinating that these building codes effectively have, in many ways, like limited the innovation going on in the space, because they're just like, hey, we're just going to build to the spec that needs, rather than what's better for the home buyer, or competing on features or sturdiness, etc. And now you kind of see these houses that are built nowadays that are just really like, it's like paper mache homes in some ways, like they're really easy to fall apart. So I think it's really fascinating how you guys are coming into this space and doing it. But I am curious, before we get too far into it, some people are going to ask me, like, how is a modular home building company that's using robots to build homes, how is that a climate tech company? Because this podcast is all about climate. So could you just help make the connection between these two things for the audience before we get too far?
Absolutely. So if you think about all of our annual carbon emissions, about 27% of those are actually coming from our homes. Our homes are actually emitting more carbon than our cars. And a big chunk of this has to do with our heating and cooling loads for how we control our climate. And there's also between 8 to 11%, and you'll have to fact check me on that, of, again, carbon emissions from the process of getting construction materials ready, right? So I think our concrete production, steel production are also huge contributors there. So all in all, the built environment's a pretty heavy contributor to emissions. And there's been a lot of focus trying to figure out, right from improving energy codes so that homes are energy efficient, to trying to start looking at the material stack, the process, and how homes come together to see if we can actually reduce the overall emissions. So where modular comes into play in our approach is twofold. Like, one, the actual home we're building they consume about 80% less energy than a traditional site-built home. A big chunk of the driving factor there is the air tightness that we're building to. It really allows us to do that a lot more precisely in the factory. So our operational carbon impact is a lot lower than traditional site-built homes. The second piece of this on embodied carbon, we've been making a few choices, right? So we've minimized the use of concrete in our foundation. So instead of having a slab on grade or a basement type of foundation system, we end up using helical piles with minimal amount of concrete, grade beams or stem wall foundations that take a whole bunch of carbon out. And we've also made choices on our insulation material, as an example. So we use recycled wood. That's a product called wood fiber as insulation, that is really allowing us to make it a carbon sink in terms of how we both get the energy performance while using better material versus using something like glass fiber or foam. And the third place where this is specific to modular that comes into play is when you're building things in a volumetric modular fashion, you're really consolidating all the truckloads and labor, like all truckloads of material and labor at a single factory location, versus having 20 different subcontractors showing up onto your house or job site over a course of many months, and several trucks showing up with less than truckloads of material. There's a lot of supporting carbon emissions that are part of a home construction process that get drastically reduced because we're getting all of this stuff consolidated in an efficient manner at a single factory location. And then you ship the least amount of trucks that are needed with your full home onto a job site, get the whole thing integrated in less than a day. We're finding a lot of efficiency improvements in terms of just transportation-related emissions around construction that get mitigated with offsite, especially with volumetric modular. And then the quality of the product we're building with this focus on energy resiliency is a place we're really moving the needle on our operational carbon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. So just to summarize, it's kind of taking the home and turning it from this kind of bespoke built thing, and you're effectively turning it into a product that you can then say, hey, how can we reduce the actual emissions of the products, of the materials that we're using? How can we make the end product more energy efficient? And how can we just reduce the waste, I guess you'd say, on the carbon emissions on all of the shipping and everything that comes along with it, because you're able to build them in a factory, and of course the quality of the product itself is also higher, right? So those are kind of the 3 core points. Okay, got it.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. I can't imagine the challenge, like when you started to come up with this idea, eventually you landed on it. Like I can imagine you have to be kind of crazy to think, hey, we're going to do this, right? I know there's obviously some, modular home manufacturing, but a lot of it, if I'm not mistaken, is still done manually. There's not a whole lot of robots involved. Is that correct?
There are many flavors of modular, right? The majority of them are versions of construction sites that are just moved indoors. So you have no industrialization. I'd say maybe another 10% of factories, at least in the US, have some version of automation. Some have robotics in them, others only CNC saws and routers. But the challenge with all of them is they're all fundamentally working off the same script, which is how do you enable mass production? So they all leverage assembly lines, techniques that are really well suited when you're building low variability products, right? If you're building a car, most cars are fairly well constrained. You're never going to find an assembly line where you can build a car and a truck simultaneously, because assembly lines don't work well with variability. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, most of offsite construction is really trying to shoehorn this technique of mass production into an industry that actually needs mass customization. When you think about the diversity of site conditions, all the zoning codes that have to comply with and building codes, it's pretty impossible to copy paste the same building in multiple locations. And unfortunately, that's what they've been trying to do, which is what has prevented the adoption of modulars. There's only so much coverage you get with the current techniques.
Mm-hmm. Well, Reframe, on top of that too, though, how many people want the exact same looking house, right?
Exactly, right. So there's a whole bunch of challenges with it. For Reframe, we sort of started with the original thesis to say, like, this is a mass customization problem. How do you build a factory that can produce snowflakes at scale and do that cost efficiently? To do that, like, that was a problem to solve. And then we had to build a lot of software, which we call pixels to parts, that allows us to really deal with high variability right in our CAD model, all the way into instructions that are fed to our CNCs, that are fed to our robot, or fed to our people. But it all started with the original recognition that this is a mass customization problem. And then what it's done is, even though we use robotics, and there's a few of the factories that use robots, they're just fundamentally different. In that our robotic work cell has cost us less than $200,000 to build, but it can actually be set up and deployed in less than a week. It directly accepts instructions from our CAD model, and it can actually frame anything that we showed in the CAD model. The way most other robotics are in, right, not just in home building, but also in traditional manufacturing, they're all pre-programmed robots that are designed to execute point movements, and they need material to be presented very precisely. So you end up with robots that, and the robot costs $50,000. The actual work cell ends up costing a few $1,000,000 because of all the other equipment that's needed and sensors that are needed to precisely locate materials that come to it. So the robotics that are available today for offsite construction, there are a few suppliers from Europe that get these work cells. One single work cell is larger than the entire micro factory that we have here in Massachusetts today. Wow. Just because of how it's architected. In our case, our work cell is 500 square feet in size, has a similar throughput as some of these larger work cells. And I think that's what we're super proud of and how we simplified the problem. So I'd say people recognize the arm as a robotic arm, but the way it's actually architected in our system to work directly off of the CAD models to produce components that are needed, we built a system that can really work well at low volumes, at small utilization in small factories, which is not true for the current state of the art.
This episode is brought to you by Climate Finance Solutions, the firm helping climate tech companies win the major government grants that drive their scale and impact. Since 2020, they've won over $1.6 billion in public funding for their clients, with a 90% success rate on the dollars that they've applied for. Their team has also helped win more than 500 million euros in European funding and managed over $275 million in grant projects. With a global team of 27 experts, CFS supports climate innovators through every stage of the funding lifecycle, from strategy to proposals to project execution. They also have a grant identification platform that enables real-time monitoring and custom matching of opportunities with alerts as new grants are released. If you're a climate investor, accelerator, or ecosystem builder, you can even join their partnership program to unlock pro bono support for your portfolio companies. Learn more at climatefinancesolutions.com. All right, back to the show. And then do you have, I mean, I don't know how you exactly measure this, but do you have specific metrics as to how much cheaper and faster you're able to build a home compared to conventional, stick built?
Yeah, and I need to qualify that this statement is true for infill construction. So today in Massachusetts, so infill, we're building in existing neighborhoods. The on-site cost of construction varies from $350 to $450 a square foot. We're pricing our product between $275 to $325 a square foot today. So call it a triple decker, so a small 3-story walk-up apartment building with 3 units. We're selling those for foundation through keys for about $1.2 to $1.3 million. Traditional construct contractors have quoted $1.5 to $1.6 million on that same building. So we're finding that we're already starting at a lower price point. And then we obviously have our margins that we're capturing behind the scenes. So in infill markets where on-site construction doesn't have any scale efficiencies and you're having to mobilize a group from site to site, we believe that our approach is vastly superior and more cost efficient. But if you apply the same lens, say in a production builder like a DR Horton or a Lennar who are building these master plan communities with a few hundred units in them, their costs are much, much lower. They're usually building for $100 to $150 a square foot. We have a lot more work to do on our end to burn our cost curve down so we can compete in those markets. Mm-hmm. So our end state goal is to eventually be able to be in a market where we can sell our product for less than $100 a square foot. I expect we're at least 10 years away from that point. Until then, we're going to focus on high cost markets, right? So out on the coast, in certain pockets, say in Colorado or Utah, where we're focused on infill markets or rural markets where there's not enough labor available, where the on-site cost of construction ends up being $250 to $500 a square foot. Those are the markets that we're going to compete in initially and sort of drive efficiencies by bringing factories in there.
Yeah, that's a fascinating. Especially, it's very nice because you have the opportunity, since it's the same product essentially, but just different markets. The pricing is very different, so you can go to those higher value markets. I'm very curious. How do you guys brand the company typically? Because right now we're in this kind of phase where people aren't necessarily as keen to call themselves a climate tech company because of some of the headwinds. So I'm curious, how do you guys focus on this, especially currently? Like, what is a typical branding of the company to attract the customers?
Yeah, I mean, we've been very focused on the problem we're solving, right? And the problem we're solving is how do we make resilient homes abundant? And so most of our messaging has been around the quality of the product and its attributes around energy resilience and its resilience to the changing climate. And we found that is, regardless of the macro sentiment around how you would think about funding climate tech or the political nature around how you think about climate and climate change, what we're finding is that at an individual level or at a business level, people are looking to maximize economic value. And we're providing a situation here where you're building a superior product that also saves you a whole bunch of money in its operational life by being energy resilient, but also having lower insurance costs and premiums than homes that aren't built to that spec. So we've just said, right, like regardless of what happens around us, the reality is people want to live in homes that they're going to feel safe in, that they want their children to be safe in, and something that costs less on the initial transaction, but also costs less in how it operates. And so we're sort of realizing that everything we're doing enables that future. So we're not having to stress too much about, do we call ourselves a climate tech company or a construction tech company or just a physical AI company? I think we've used all of those versions through our journey. End of the day, we're a company that's in the business of making housing abundant. And we're hoping that the types of homes we build are better for the planet and for people living in them. And we'll sort of work through that.
Yeah, because you guys do, I'm assuming your primary customer are individuals buying, or do you sell to a typically B2B technically, and then they sell the homes?
Yeah, actually, our preferred customers are developers. So these are developers that are spec building communities, and then they're then selling to individuals. So our design team is obsessing over the user experience of the occupant, but all of our go-to-market motions are built around how do we tell the story to developers so they understand the value benefit of what we're building.
Yeah. So this goes to my next question, which is, and you sort of already answered it, but the success you've achieved so far, do you believe that a lot of it primarily comes from just focusing on those co-benefits of cost and speed and I guess product quality then over saying like, oh, this is a sustainable product? That's not the core reason people are buying. They're buying for the other reasons.
Yeah, the way I would put it is when you're trying to build a resilient home, the home is still the operating entity. Like if you're not if the end outcome is not a home someone can live in, then you sort of failed your objective. And what we're finding today, and we sort of have tailwinds because we're in Massachusetts, the building code and energy codes that have been updated and adopted actually require you to build a pretty high performance home. So here we're not having to spend a lot more time talking about it. We're actually just able to talk about the quality, the speed, and the cost efficiency of our builds. But when we start looking at other markets, for example, we're also starting to deliver homes in Southern California as part of the wildfire rebuild with the goal to set up manufacturing capacity close to it. There we're spending a lot more time talking about the resiliency of our units. Right? In addition to the quality, cost, and speed, we do spend a lot more time talking about how the airtightness of our units and our wall assemblies allow us to get to 1 hour rated fire ratings, but also make us a lot more resilient to wildfires compared to code minimum homes. Mm-hmm. And there the customers are really looking for it. So it also helps that we needed to speak to that. And we've definitely had the advantage of being in Massachusetts, and where, just for the benefit of your audience, if you're building a multifamily project of 18,000 square feet or more, you have to build to the most energy efficient code called Passive House, and that's required by code, right? And that's nowhere else in the country do you need to do that. So in general, we have an energy code regimen here that favors best practices in energy efficiency. There's also a look into your embodied carbon profile. So in a way, we feel like we have a lot of tailwinds here in terms of we can just say, like, that is a given. In addition to that, we exceed those codes by doing A, B, or C. But guess what? We're still faster and more cost efficient and have a better quality that we can verify compared to stick built. So it's a different conversation tone here versus in other markets where either people are seeking out energy efficiency. And we found this a lot more in the affordable housing space, where a lot of times for the funding sources they're going after, they are required to build a much higher performing home. Other times they do that because they realize from an economic standpoint, the cost of energy and cost of insurance have actually grown the fastest. If you think about your monthly operating cost for a home, your mortgage cost is more or less fixed once you sign your mortgage. But the costs you don't control are your energy costs and insurance costs, and they've doubled in the last decade. So a lot more of our sophisticated developers are very clued into it. So they're looking at all decisions from a total cost of ownership lens. And in that case, they seek us out because they're really looking to find ways to control on their energy costs and also future insurance costs.
Wow. That's some interesting numbers there. I appreciate the perspective. And I'm kind of curious. This is something I've not heard talked about a lot, but I would be curious. I have a feeling you have thoughts on this. Is you mentioned you were helping do some rebuild stuff in the LA area with fires. Are there estimates around how much home destruction we will see from climate change in the coming couple decades that you kind of think in the back of your mind, like even if we don't build this, or if we didn't build this technology that can build homes faster, we're going to be just completely destroyed as a society because we can't build enough homes?
Yeah, unfortunately, the risk factors, and I forget the stats around this, but almost, I think, 60% of the country's properties today have some type of wildfire exposure risk. And that number just keeps increasing. I think so between wildfires that get most of the West Coast, right, and actually all the way up to the Midwest, and then the wind risk down from Florida through the Gulf, and then the flooding risk is associated with that. We unfortunately have a very large portion of the built environment that's at risk from climate-related disasters, which then brings me to the other point where I actually believe that the change agents who are actually going to save the world will be insurance companies, because they're the ones now mandating higher performing structures versus what building codes are requiring. And a lot of this has to do with that. Like, they're seeing the economic impacts already on having to underwrite a lot of these properties. So we obviously don't want that future to manifest the way the data is suggesting. But the reality is, even if it wasn't for the need to rebuild quickly after disasters, I think just given the impending shortage we have in housing stock, but also the need to change the housing stock, right? I think we have a pretty huge demographic shift taking place with a lot of boomers or empty nesters who are going to start downsizing and trying to move into homes that have better services than single-story homes. Like we don't have the housing stock to allow them to move into, which then frees up their homes for others to move into. Like there's this whole musical chair situation that we have. So we need to create a lot more housing with different types of assets, right? So housing that people can age into, a lot more starter homes for young families to move into. So there's a lot of housing that needs to get built. And we need to be able to build this quickly because the faster we build, the cheaper it becomes. So our core technology has place regardless of what might happen with disasters. But if disaster does strike, we believe that the technology and the team and the culture we're building allows us to react to that and rebuild homes quickly.
I am super excited to share that we at Clean Techies are going to be making content at the upcoming Hack Summit in New York City. This is returning to New Lab December 10th and 11th. And here with me to tell us more about Hack Summit is Laura Hodgkiss from Climate Hack.
Thanks so much. Yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking the time to just break down a little bit more about this summit. A lot of people are not familiar. So in brief, can you just tell us what is Hack Summit?
Yes, absolutely. So we're really excited. Last year we came to New York for the first time, having hosted 5 events in Switzerland. We had a fantastic success, amazing people that were joining. It was investors, founders, corporates, CVCs and operators, all within the climate deep tech space with a real enthusiasm and commitment to collaborate. And it's really a chance for everyone to come together. We want to accelerate more investment into climate deep tech, unlock those opportunities. We want more startups to be seen by investors and operators to find their next scale up partner, find new partnerships to grow, collaborations that spark at the Hack Summit, then go on to create great success.
Especially the focus on the deep tech side of things is really important because it's very difficult to move these things forward. So Climate Hack is the organization that's putting this on. Could you tell us a little bit more about Climate Hack specifically?
Yeah, definitely. So Climate Hack is a global community. The team is based in Switzerland, but we have ambassadors who work all around the world with us, and they're putting on local free events in their communities. The aim is really to bring together people that could be students, it can be investors, startups, and founders coming together. And then throughout the year, we're writing different editorial and content to connect the dots between investors and startups so that more people can understand what's going on, what are these technologies, and how can they get involved in the climate tech space. And the Hack Summit is really the occasion where everyone can come together twice a year now for the Hack Summit to be able to have those exchanges and get together.
Can you tell us a little bit more about who is going to be there? Any particular names you want to mention, or generally the type of people who will show up?
Yeah, definitely. So we have a wide range of founders working across the climate deep tech space, and they're going to be joining us for fireside chats with partners from the VCs that are backing them as well to uncover their journey. So, for example, we have Cody Fink, who is the co-founder and CEO of Brimstone. He's going to be joining Rachel Slabow, who's a partner at DCVC. And then we have, for example, Liz Dennett from Enderlith, and she's going to be speaking to Deborah Zajac of SOSV to talk about her scale up and growth. And then also we can learn about what's happening at SOSV. We have Sampriti Bhattacharya, who is building America's first all-electric hydrofoiling vessel. And then I'm also personally excited about Laureen Meru, who's the founder and CEO of Hertha Metals. I'm sure you probably saw as well, she recently came out of stealth with 17 million. And now she's forging the future of steel.
Yeah, there's so many really fascinating companies. What are you most excited for about Hack Summit this year particularly?
It's a really exciting moment when you enter, and all of these incredible founders and these investors and these operators. It's that real energy in the room, I think, that sets it apart from other conferences. You know, the most senior partners from the VC funds or the Series B, Series C founders are really willing to talk to the earlier stage founders or make time for everyone. And I think that's really what the climate deep tech community is. It's really, really powerful.
Who should apply to come to the Hack Summit?
So the Hack Summit is the perfect event for founders that are fundraising. It's for investors that are looking to find what's new and next that's happening in the climate deep tech space. And it's also open for CVCs that are looking to partner with startups and operators that are working in the space. If they share our passion and excitement for scaling deep tech solutions, then they should be in the room.
And where can people apply to come to the Hack Summit?
So hacksummitny.com is the website to go. We've got the sign up there.
Yeah, it was as soon as I saw that this was happening, I was like, man, I have to go because half of your main speakers have been on the podcast already. So
I saw,
it's a
yes, yeah.
it's a perfect fit for us. But no, I'm really excited for this, and I hope just encourage everybody, if you have the opportunity, come to this summit to learn from founders who have already scaled to a very large extent. Maybe you need to learn from somebody who's further along, or you've got some lessons to share with other founders earlier in their journey. So apply to come today. You heard it. The link will be in the description, and we hope to see you there. Yeah. The point about the insurance companies being the change agents, I think, is something a lot of people did not expect per se, but it's very fascinating to me to see that because insurance companies are just, ruthless in terms of they refuse to lose money. They are the first ones noticing and really putting the financial targets and the numbers on the climate destruction and saying, hey, listen, we know this is happening because we're seeing in the numbers, we're losing money. And I still haven't noticed that people are really waking up to it, because I don't think there's that many people who are how would you say, like, climate deniers who actually also follow the insurance companies, like, trends. So it'll be fascinating once it becomes more known. It is becoming a little bit more known because people can't get their own insurance. So we'll see, but I think it's fascinating to see the role that they will play in helping move that industry forward, move the resilience future forward.
Absolutely. And I think there's also a core point you're getting to, which, right, all of us who are very aware of climate risk can also sort of factor into how we communicate about it. Like, economics always translates, like, regardless of your political stance or your belief stance and your values. I think economics, we're realizing, actually translate pretty well across the spectrum. And when people start seeing their energy bills go up or their insurance bills go up or realize they can't get insurance, it doesn't matter what the cause is, they see the effect and the result. And that becomes a bigger catalyst for changing behavior or even changing someone's opinion on how they should rebuild. Like, if you were to go talk to a person and say, here's a high performance carbon negative home, is going to, right, like, you should consider living in this, versus here's a home that's going to save you money through its lifetime and keep you safe, you'll find that more people will choose to go to the second statement versus the first. But unfortunately, a lot of us in the climate tech space have only learned to speak about it from the spectrum of from carbon content versus economic value. And I think the more we can actually translate into economics, I think the more we will actually connect with the layperson making a decision. Because at that point, you're not virtue signaling or value signaling. You're purely talking about, does this have economic value?
Yeah, and then at that point, it's impossible to politicize it as well, because who doesn't want more affordable living, et cetera. So I think that's a good point. Any founder who's not already doing that should really take note, because it's going to be a rough go if you don't figure that out. So no, I appreciate that. I'm curious, if this is such a huge issue, what is your plan for the future in terms of scaling the company? Do you plan to then license the technology out to build these plants? Like, how can you actually scale up many of these, I think you call them micro factories, all over the place?
Absolutely. Yeah, we're working back from a goal of how do we enable, right, like, how do we build 1 million homes by 2045? To do that with our current microfactory design, we need about 800 microfactories across the world. And the scaling part, I expect, will probably go in 2 stages. The current phase we're in, our goal is to own and operate these microfactories. We want to have between 5 to 10 deployed across 5 new markets by 2030. And we're creating each of these factories as joint ventures with local developers and GCs. But we're still taking the profit and loss responsibility, so we learn how to operate and make these factories efficient. Step 2 is effectively look back and say, okay, like, now we have a body of work where we have these factories running, producing homes, and our technology that's been hardened. That's the point in time where I could see us actually then licensing factories where you could be a production home builder who wants to want their own factory. We're then able to go in, set up the factory, right? We might charge a monthly technology fee, but our customer is then responsible for operating the factory and sort of producing the piece. What I don't have a good sense for today, and we'll see how the industry evolves, is construction today is a very outcome-based business. Like, developers want a building to magically appear overnight. They don't really care for the act of construction. So part of our thinking too is, like, that might still be the case where people want the outcome at a guaranteed price, and they don't really care about the means and methods. And if that manifests itself, then the goal, then we will probably have to be the company that builds the full network of factories with other capital partners and continue to operate them. And that so is the mode we want to build. We're keeping an open mind for one where we might have to license our factory for a different provider.
Yeah, because I can imagine that probably once you have really narrowed down how these things work and how they operate efficiently, the core challenge would be the networks, because some of these things are relationship based, and it's like that's why you probably do the JV, I'm assuming, because you can plug into an existing network where they already have a sales team, or they're developing their own projects, for example, and there's the demand, and then you can just bring in the supply chain, bring in the technical know-how, and then get these things built, right? Is that the general gist of it?
Absolutely, because the final physical constraint here is land, right? Like everything else can be created except for land, and with land comes all the constructs of local connections to how do you unblock your ability to build on that piece of land. And so the JVs we want to sign with local developers are ones who already have access to land, or at least off-market deals.
Yeah.
For land. So I think that's where we believe we sort of unlock our ability to create housing supply, because housing without land are just boxes.
Yeah.
And we're not in the business of building boxes. So
how important is that you mentioned this kind of in passing, but I want to double down on this permitting piece around understanding local legislation on how to get things built to code. How important is that in landing these partnerships? Do they actually care about the modular stuff so much sometimes, or do they say, hey, wow, if you can like get us through that permitting process quickly and accurately, that's also a huge thing. Is that a big deal? Clean tech startups need to hire the right talent to hit their milestones, especially in the early days. Without the right team, you'll never make it to your Series A round. And after years of observing this struggle that pre-seed and seed stage clean tech startups have to get the right talent, I decided to create Earth Tech Talent. Our mission is to help clean tech companies hire the best talent so they can succeed and make the world greener. So whether you need some advice on how to craft your talent acquisition strategy, you need to increase your number or quality of applicants, or you need help screening the candidates to save you some time, or you just need traditional headhunting services, reach out today. We have priced everything so that even a pre-seed startup can afford it. Fundamentally, you're only building on clean tech startups because you care about humans. Your hiring process should reflect that. Work with us to craft a hiring process that is human-centered. Doing this will lead to all those job applicants becoming your biggest champions in the public. And even if they get rejected, we make it so that they will still have a positive experience and they'll want to apply again in the future, and they'll be your biggest advocates. To get in touch, reach out to me on LinkedIn or go to earthtechtalent.com/contact. That's Earth, ERTH, techtalent.com/contact. All right, back to the show.
It really depends on the customer, right? So there's still a whole education piece involved, where a lot of developers and homeowners have been exposed to mobile homes and trailer homes from the 60s and 70s, which were built to a different standard and were also catered to a very different segment of the market. But it's tarnished, like the builds back in the day have sort of affected people's impression of what factory built housing is. Today, even, they're called manufactured houses, they're built to a specific HUD code. They've come a very long way, right? They're very attractive units, but there is zoning that prevents you from placing them everywhere. There's a bunch of other challenges with it. But we end up having to explain for all of this because we're building modular homes that are built to local site codes. So anywhere you can build a home on site, we should be able to bring modules and set them on site. But we have to educate a lot of customers through this process that are already not familiar with it. So there's still some recognition that, there's something different with modular. How do we make sure there's no risk being transferred down the stack to future renters or homeowners? Like these units will actually get occupied. And there's about 40 states in the country that have a very streamlined permitting process for factory built housing. Those are also the states that have all the housing demand. So there's a good intersection.
Nice.
So that helps. But it doesn't make the education piece go away. So when developers are reaching out to us, they're reaching out to us because they cannot make the project pencil with traditional means and methods, right? On-site construction has gotten too expensive, or even though they have a price, the GC cannot show up for a year from now or 2 years from now because of labor challenges. So those are places where they're reaching out to us, say, hey, what would it take for us to unlock this project? Can you guys take a look at these numbers and see if you can do any better? And we have found that typically for some of these markets that we're looking at, we're substantially faster, between 10 to 30% cheaper in our pricing. That's allowing us to start to win some of these deals, or at least convince customers that modular can be faster and cost effective in some of these markets.
Yeah. So when you decided to build this company, you figured out what you were going to do. I'm very curious because you guys are at Series A right now, or Series Seed?
Series A.
Okay, Series A. And so what was the actual MVP to get going? Because in my mind, like the MVP for a pre-seed startup to build a microfactory seems impossible. Like, how did you actually get moving to get the traction to then raise the seed round and then the Series A? Can you walk us through those stages and what the
Yeah,
product itself looked like?
absolutely. I mean, this is a business that is very hard to bootstrap. So we had a slightly different route. We incubated the thesis with our lead investor, Eclipse Ventures, and built conviction on the thesis of microfactories. We spent a lot of time visiting other factories, spent a lot of time with developers, understanding what had to be true for them to adopt offsite construction, specifically modular construction to scale. Build conviction in the latent customer demand if certain things were to be true, and then build conviction that given our founding team's background, like we could build the technology to realize what had to be true on the microfactory side.
So one thing, just to back up a little bit, when you say build conviction, what did that really look like? You just going out and talking to people and they were saying, holy crap, like we really need this?
It was a bunch of qualitative discussions, a lot of quantitative discussions, trying to even get understanding on what would it take for someone to sign a contract or an offtake commitment. So we're trying to get signals of various levels to understand, okay, is the demand real? And we build conviction that this is not the industry doesn't have a demand problem, it has a supply problem. So that was actually a very helpful signal. And then the question became, like, can we build supply that's extremely capital efficient? And that's where the microfactory thesis came in. Like, so effectively, like, could you build factories in 100 days that cost less than $5 million to produce homes that are resilient? And we built conviction with our spreadsheet exercises that with the team that we were starting to round up, we could achieve those objectives. And that allowed us to sort of pitch our lead investor to seed fund the business. So the goal of seed funding was then to go from that pitch deck and the spreadsheet model to an operational factory and a home in the ground. So we sort of did that with our seed funding. So we went from pitch deck to certified factory in about a year. And in 18 months in total, we had our first home that was permitted and site integrated. And then we used that to launch our Series A. And the Series A funding is now helping us de-risk the unit economics, continuing to mature the technology stack so we can scale this microfactory across the country and demonstrate stronger demand.
So just to back up then a little bit, you said you confirmed the demand and the fact that you believed technically you could actually achieve the product before you raised any money, or had you raised like a pre-seed before that?
No, that was all before even the company existed. So that was all part of the thesis exploration.
Okay. Interesting.
And then
very fascinating. And then the seed money itself went to build the first microfactory, and that's a full scale microfactory, the $5 million.
So we built, it's about $800,000 is what we spent in this factory. It's 16,000 square foot in size. So it's a scaled version where we have all the building blocks that we need for the larger microfactory, but we've been able to verify the throughput on a work cell level. So now we know that when we build a larger factory, each of these work cells are mechanically decoupled. That we can actually get the bigger throughput.
Like modular, where you can just stack more of them effectively.
Exactly.
Okay, got it. So just to make sure that other founders listening can understand, it's confirmed demand, make sure that technically speaking, it's possible to do what you're trying to do. And then the next thing is take whatever you want to build and scale down to the smallest unit that you can, confirm that works at the throughput that you need. And then you can easily, I shouldn't say easily, then you can feasibly scale up to the larger size. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Like you got to take risk out from every step. And I think the first biggest risk to remove from the equation is there demand for the problem you're trying to solve?
Yeah.
Everything starts from there. And how large is that demand? And is it, depending on if you're going for venture scale or private equity, like building conviction, how large the demand needs to be to bring investors on board.
Yeah, I think it's extremely clear. I mean, I haven't seen examples that are, I've seen a few, but not many examples that are this clear of understanding going through that process in 18 months, you said, from pitch deck to getting the first home built, you said?
That's right.
Yeah, that's incredible. I'm very curious, is this kind of thought process or very methodical way of going about things, is this something that you learned from your time at Amazon, or is this something that you and your co-founders naturally have? Like, where did you guys, how did you develop that specific mental framework?
I think it's probably a mix of our demeanor and our professional training over time. I think we've become really good at breaking down system level problems, or understanding what a system level problem is, and then breaking that down into components that we can then de-risk. right? I think Aaron, one of my co-founders, has a saying like, how do you eat an elephant? Like one bite at a time, right? So I think that's been, so trying to figure out which bite first is also important. And I think I think some of it was our training and sort of making sure we're always working back from the customer and the outcome. And then the other tenet that we've also picked up over time is do the simple things first, then optimize. And we sort of apply that through and through. And you always get points for simplification because anything you simplify will scale more easily. So these are all earned experiences that we've been translating into this business.
So on the point of figuring out whether or not you could technically, as a team, you mentioned as a team, could we technically achieve these outcomes? Did you already have co-founders with this idea that you were working with that had those skills, or did you have to go find additional people that could supplement anything that you guys were missing?
Yeah, so the thesis exploration was me as a venture partner, and we had two other people within Eclipse that helped really test the thinking and make sure we had at least a business thesis. And then once I realized what the solution space could be, that is when I went and enlisted my co-founders, Aaron and Felipe. They were both from Amazon Robotics, because I knew there was a component of vision-guided robotics that was critical. Felipe is one of the world's leading experts there. And then there's also a component of how do you augment people and convert trades into tasks. And that's something Aaron really did with Amazon operations and human interfaces. So I knew at least there would be solid people if I could land them. And it took a while to land both of them. But it also gave enough color to say, okay, like, what does the rest of the team need to look like? And so getting them both together helped build conviction that we could actually then go and build the rest of the team around it. And I think it was like, one thing after the other that sort of broke the risk curve down.
How did you end up landing them? Just kind of really like communicating the things that you had learned through the discovery process? Like, what was the actual method of convincing people like that, making probably very good money at Amazon, to come and do a startup that is obviously inherently risky?
I mean, it finally came down to, do you want to solve the world's biggest problem? And a certain type of personality gravitates to that kind of statement. And those are the people we're looking to hire. And so that resonated with my co-founders, and that's been resonating with a lot of our employees who have left some really high-paying jobs to come take the risk with us to basically put in a winning shot to make sure we can solve this problem.
Mm-hmm. That's fascinating. I was going to ask you that next, is that once you were able to get star players for the co-founding team who had, direct experience and understood the problem set, or knew how to go about solving the problem set in place, how much easier was it, do you think, to then attract all of the other talent that comes in? And can you talk a little bit more about broadly what your team size is right now and maybe some of the core roles you guys recruit for?
Absolutely. Yeah, every hire we've made has helped make the subsequent hire easier. And I think part of it, and the caveat here is making sure that we're really raising the bar on the hires we're making. So we're a team of 63 today. Of the 63 people we've got, so roughly call it 35-28 split between what we call the technology company. So the company that's doing everything from sales, building design, the actual manufacturing software, design software tech. And the remaining 28 are part of our factory and field operations team. So they're comprising of our builders, our supervisors, our supply chain operations, etc. So we built this team in 3 stages. Like, we were a team of 10 the first year, got jumped to roughly a team of 30 in the second year, and now we've doubled from that into the 60s. And we borrow a lot of our hiring principles from Amazon. I mean, we have our core set of operating principles that we use to think about how does a person fit into what we really want to celebrate. As an example, outcome over ego is one such principle that we have, and really use that to key off on candidates coming in to understand how they would fit our culture, but also get some really good examples for things they've accomplished. And a lot of our search process today has been a mix of referrals to folks finding out about us based on the progress we're making. Press coverage has helped. And then we have used search firms for selective roles that have been hard to find.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious, this idea, I've worked with a few people who have previously worked at Amazon and then we're hiring for their team. And it's always stood out to me that they are really particular, and they seem to have a very good read on understanding, or at least they care deeply about making sure the person is the right fit for the team. If somebody has not worked at Amazon, how can they learn that skill of recognizing that importance? And like, what do you think it comes down to as the core thing that really allows you to pick the right people and to be a good judge of those talent?
Yeah, it's a really interesting context switch, right? I think the whole premise for Amazon's process, and I think a lot of other companies do this too, is your past performance is a good indicator of future performance. But you don't really learn this in school, right? Like when you're coming out of college or school and you're sort of interviewing for your first set of jobs, most of the interviewing process is about like, can you solve this problem versus what problems have you solved? Because you really haven't done much professionally yet. So I think the whole switch is trying to really figure out like a lot of habits and values have proven points before, right? Has this person consistently gone after the big hairy problem? Has this person consistently gone after problems that others thought was impossible? Like you can find examples of those from people's narratives. And I think the more you sort of key in on asking the right questions that allow you to learn more about how a person achieved an outcome in their previous role, that gives you some really good signals for how they would behave in their role in your company, right? If someone said, I absolutely thought I had the right answer and I made sure everyone heard about it, and if they didn't go my way, I wouldn't do it, then you very clearly get a sense for, okay, like this person's really believes in their way of doing things. Maybe they're not going to be a good fit for us because we actually believe it's more important to get to the right outcome than to be right? So it almost serves as a filter. So it's not that there's a right or wrong answer. It's about like, is that the right? Are we calibrated on how this person would behave and the level of outcome they delivered before? And it's just a different way to sort of assess fit. And this is all about trying to find a fit. Like, can we find the right person at the right time? Not necessarily can we find the perfect person. So I think a lot of that is just calibrating on what the role needs and how the person there might be able to address the needs of the role, but also be a force multiplier over time.
Yeah, I think that the point about timing is something a lot of people misunderstand. They want the perfect person, but if you wait too long, you're going to be screwed anyways because you just need somebody in the seat sometimes, right? But you can't make too many compromises. I think I've got time for one last thing is here. When you are interviewing, what is one of your favorite interview questions specifically? You mentioned asking the right questions. I'm curious what you would put there.
The one I usually go after is, tell me about a time where you delivered a project or an outcome that others thought was impossible. And we've always found some really interesting examples there.
Amazing. And then what are you most excited? We're out of time already. So I'm curious, what are you most excited for in the future, the next, 6 to 12 months with what you guys are building, and any final call outs?
I mean, we're excited for people to start living in the homes we're building right now and continuing to scale that up. The team is also really looking forward to us opening up our second factory in a whole new market. That's, I'm sure, is going to come with a whole bunch of learnings. But yeah, I mean, we're sort of making measured progress against our goals. It'll be one home at a time, one factory at a time. And we hope to be as prevalent as Home Depots out there, that our micro factories are just out around in similar neighborhoods across the country.
Yeah, absolutely amazing. I'm definitely gonna have to figure out how I can come visit one of your factories at some point and get a sneak peek and see how it's working. But I really appreciate you doing this. We're definitely gonna have to have you on another time because we didn't cover everything that we could have, and I'm sure you'll have more learnings even in just a few months. So I appreciate you coming on and sharing some of your amazing wisdom and rooting for you guys in the next few months.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me and for allowing us to tell our story.
100%. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in today. If you enjoyed the episode, please give us 5 stars on your favorite podcasting player. Go on YouTube and subscribe. We're trying to grow the subscriber reach there as we put out a lot more mini content on YouTube, shorts, as well as kind of mini episodes from these other big episodes. So you can get a little bit more for your lunch eating. While you're eating lunch, you can watch your YouTube, etc. And we also love to hear from you. Who are your dream guests that you'd like to have on the future? What are your key takeaways? Just reach out. We'd love to hear from you. Also, another shout out to our sponsors before we end here. Climate Finance Solutions. Reach out to Joel and the team when you want to set yourself up for success during the grant application process. And then Earth Search, the search firm that I run. Reach out to us if you care about hiring the best talent. I've been doing this for 5.5 years with over 80 placements. And by the way, we also charge way less than traditional search firms, with our average placement fee coming in at around $18,000. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next week on Clean Techies.